What's up everyone, it's Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Hole Audio and Visual, and today we are back with another tutorial, and I'm super excited because this week's tutorial is actually sponsored by Auto-Tune Unlimited, so thank you so much to all of them for sponsoring this video, and we'll be talking a little bit more about the sponsor in 1 second, but I did want to mention that this video is going to have a giveaway at the end. You can win 1, 3, or 5 years of the Auto-Tune Unlimited subscription model, so stay put until the end of the video where we'll talk about that. But what we're going to be doing in this video is using some of the tools you'll find in Auto-Tune's new subscription model to actually enhance your vocal production and your vocal mix. So Antares has actually decided to do a subscription model where they're going to give you access to all of their plugins at one low monthly rate. So it's going to be $24.99 per month or $249 for the year, which you would get 2 months basically for free. And if you're an avid Pro Tools or Pro Tools Ultimate member on their current bundle, it actually comes with 3 months of this Auto-Tune Unlimited package. So go ahead and try that out. Let's chat a bit about what you get in these plugins, and then once we kind of address all the plugins, we'll hop into a session where we can actually show you how they sound in use. So this bundle is going to come with Auto-Tune Pro, which to me, it's the plugin that you'll probably see me use the most. It's definitely on every single vocal that I ever do. And Auto-Tune Pro is great because it's going to have that classic Auto-Tune sound, but you do have the flexibility of actually doing some graph tuning and going in and manually fixing stuff. So if you're doing a lot of vocal editing, Auto-Tune Pro is essential, but it does get pretty CPU heavy, which is where some of these other Auto-Tunes really come into shine. So you're also going to get Auto-Tune EFX in the bundle, which does not have the graph editing, but it does have a bunch of extra creative little effects that you can use and vocal processing stuff that you can actually use in your mix. And if you find yourself tracking a vocalist where they might want to hear themselves and kind of hear the Auto-Tune in real time, as you know, latency can get pretty intense. So Auto-Tune has remedied that with Auto-Tune Artist, and you can use that in the studio or live. It's basically their low latency version where you can set the key, you can set all the parameters, and then that's going to have total basic low latency access for them. And the last form of Auto-Tune that you're going to get is Auto-Tune Access, which is super basic. It's a super low footprint for CPU, and I love using this on stuff like if I have a choir section or tons of harmonies and every vocal might just need its own little instance of Auto-Tune, but I'm not going to be doing anything crazy. I'm not doing formant shifting, I'm not doing graph tuning, and I just need everything to kind of slide into the right place. Use something like Auto-Tune Access on all of those. That way you're not going to take up a ton of CPU, but you're still going to get that tightness that you're looking for in your actual individual tracks. Now, outside of the Auto-Tune plugins, this is where it gets really fun because they do have some creative and some actual mixing style plugins. So one that we're going to be using today is called Sybil. It's basically their version of a de-esser, and honestly, I've been using it for the past couple weeks and I really like it. It's super simple. We'll jump into that in just a bit. Another one that they have is Mutator. That's really fun to use on vocals. It's also really fun to use on stuff like percussion because you can automate some different parameters and you can basically mangle sounds all up, and you can get some really cool and interesting stuff in your productions. They've also got Harmony Engine, which you can just track one vocal and then turn that on to the key of the song, and it'll go ahead and start building out harmonies, and you can, select what kind of harmony you want. Do you want a third? Do you want a fifth? How do you want them panned? Do you want that to be one vocal or 2 vocals? And that's really cool for if you have something that you need to throw on the fly. They also have a really good doubler plugin called Duo. You'll see me throw that on what's going to be a send, so it'll basically widen up that vocal. And it's really great for little ad-libs that you might want pushed to the side, but you don't want to necessarily double track them. You're also going to get a really cool saturation plugin called Warm, which they do have like a tube setting where it can kind of turn maybe a really sterile, just FET or, kind of budget-friendly large diaphragm condenser into a little bit more saturated and interesting tube mic. You can also go pretty crazy with it and saturate some stuff. You'll see us use that on some delay sends. There's a plugin called Choir that you can throw on one vocalist, and it'll basically turn that into 8, 16, 32 vocalists and kind of pan them all out, basically make them a little bit different in pitch and in timing, and you'll kind of get a really cool choir. So you'll see we'll actually turn like 20 different vocals into one like 200-person choir in this song. And then they've also got something called Articulator, which is their version of like a talk box or a vocoder, where you can actually sidechain that to your vocal, and you can put that on anything. So it's not like most vocoders that you have to be working with MIDI. You can actually throw this on a guitar track, you can throw this on another vocal, anything that's going to have an audio signal coming through, you can basically sidechain through this kind of talk box vocoder. And then they also have one called Punch, which is basically a compressor that's going to add some transient information. It's really great for if you have a soft vocal that you need to actually punch in the mix a little bit more, or if you're doing something like beatboxing where you want to get some actual transient punch, but it's not going to be able to happen inside the mic. And they do have a plugin called Throat, which you've probably seen me do something like this on the channel a lot, where I'll turn the formant down in Auto-Tune Pro. If you find yourself wanting to do that effect where you kind of change the throat length, you can easily just drag Throat on. That way you don't have to have another instance of Auto-Tune or be automating your main tuning mechanism. And it's going to be really great for if you want to add some of those like formant shifted vocals up and down. It's really sick on vocal chops, and it can be really cool on a synth track. And the last plugin we're going to be looking at today is a plugin called Mic Mod, where you basically pop in what mic you're using, and then you can transform that mic into something completely different. So today we'll turn an SM7B into something more like a U87, and we'll be looking at how you can use that to add extra flavor and flair onto your vocals and get a much more lush and expensive vocal sound with a budget-friendly mic. So if you want to see all of these plugins in action, you're in luck, because we're going to jump in and look at most of these happening on a track. And if you find yourself wanting to get any of these, definitely head over to Auto-Tune Unlimited and sign up for their subscription program. Again, it's $24.99 per month or $249 for the entire year. And if you want the option to enter our giveaway to win 1, 3, or 5 years of this for free, stay till the end of the video where we chat about how you can do that. All right, now we're actually in a session. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at some of these plugins in real time and see how we can use them to enhance our vocal production and our vocal mixes. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to this lead vocal right here. And as you can see, of course, you've seen me do it on the channel a million times, but we've got Auto-Tune Pro set to the key of the song, and then I just kind of adjust the retune speed and the flex tune to give me something that's going to be tuned tight enough to fit in, and then I'll kind of use the flex tune just to dial that back a little bit and allow a little bit more flexibility so it doesn't sound super like Travis Scotty or Post Maloney. And typically I'll use Auto-Tune Pro just in case I need to go back and do any graph editing, but I could have easily used EFX for this. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to actually go to their plugin called Mic Mod. And so for this song, I used a Shure SM7B for this vocal take. And let me show you what it sounds like without it.
Why does everybody seem so happy all the time? And I can't seem to dig myself out of my mind to fake.
And I did use that going into my ASP 800, so I did kind of crank the high end on that and just kind of tame the low mids with their HMX knob. And then to me, that was going to give me a much more kind of focused sound than the SMB will typically give. But I wanted to take that one step farther, so what I did is I used Mic Mod, and you can select whatever mic you're using, especially if you have a budget mic. They're going to have almost all of those. And then what you do is you kind of put your proximity in. So I was about a foot away from the microphone, especially with the SM7B. You don't want to be right up on it. You're going to get some nasty, nasty low mids. So you basically put in your settings of your mic. And then what you can do is you can come here and you can select any other mic that you might want to swap that out for. So for this song, I used a Neumann U87. I could have also gone with something like, I think one of the ones I played around with at first was this Manley right here, the Reference Gold.
To dig myself out of my mind, to fake a smile and show my teeth, just so everyone will leave. I don't like questions that
But as you can see, when I popped the Neumann U87 on, I like the low mids in that a little bit better. The other one was just a little too scooped and bright for my taste, so I popped that in. And then you can also just mix around with the proximity and make sure that you're not going to get any like tubbiness, or it's not going to be way too far off and you're going to get this weird air. Another cool feature of this plugin is that they do have a tube saturation if you want to kind of throw on a little bit of extra warmth. I didn't touch it on here because there is a plugin called Warm that you can actually throw on later in your chain, and it doesn't make it onto my main vocal, but you'll see us kind of use that a little bit later. So I used Mic Mod to basically take my SM7B, which is a pretty dark, almost flat, kind of tubby mic, and turn that into a U87, which is going to be a bit more full-bodied, but a lot tighter and a lot smoother, and it's going to give me a lot more defined top end. And then after that, the next thing we did was threw on a instance of Sybil, and this is basically their de-esser. I like this because this works so similar to how you would see like a stock de-esser. So if you're really, really familiar with stock plugins, this GUI shouldn't really freak you out too much. However, it does sound better than the stock Cubase plugins that I've used at least. And let's just go ahead and look at what we're doing here.
Does everybody seem so happy all the time? And I can't seem to dig myself out of my mind, to fake a smile and show my teeth, just so.
And what I like about this is you can set your sidechain, so everybody's going to have some sibilance at a little bit of a different area in their vocal. For me, mine tends to be right around 6 to 8K. The 6K wasn't bothering me in this song, so I went straight up with the 8K. Because once I started turning it down, I was losing a little bit of the definition that would kick in. And then once you figure out where exactly you want to start de-essing, that's where you can set your threshold, which will basically tell it when to kick in. If you have an S over a certain level, that's when the actual de-esser will kick in. And then you have your compression, which is going to control how tight you're going to squeeze that down. So if you were to drive this all the way up, that's where you might start getting some of that kind of lispy sound effect. That's where you might start getting some of the kind of definition that goes away. Because if you're going to squeeze it too hard,
and I can't seem to dig myself out of my mind, to fake a smile and show my teeth, just so everyone.
I like it being a little bit lighter because I do still like a little bit of poke in this song. And then what you can do is you can set your attack time and your release time. So typically I want the attack time pretty fast, but I don't want it at 0 or at 1, because if you do something like that, it's going to basically start to like demolish your vocals, and you're going to lose all of that little kind of transient punch on those, you know, different sibilant sounds. And if you lose those, it starts to sound really washy and messy. And then your release time is really nice too, because if you have a smoother song that's going to have these more kind of long drawn out S's, you can kind of dial this up to make sure that it's not going to kick off too fast, or you can dial it up to kind of smooth it out if it sounds a little bit too choppy. So your pretty standard kind of compressor settings, but this is going to be focused on one specific frequency, which is basically what a de-esser is kind of always doing. That's what we're using from the actual bundle on the lead vocal. And then we've also got a send over here for the vocal parallel widening, where I'm going to be using Duo. And this is basically their vocal doubler. It's really, really good for if you have one vocal and you want to kind of spread it out and not get a super, super chorusy or phasey effect. I like using something like this to kind of just give me a little bit of extra width without getting really, really kind of modulated and weird sounding. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's necessary, but in this song I didn't feel like it was. And you've still got your pitch variation and your timing variation, so you can still mess with it a little bit and get a little bit of that extra sauce. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it's doing. I'll turn the send up and down.
Everybody seems so happy all the time, and I can't seem to dig myself out of my mind to fake a smile and show my teeth just so everyone will leave.
And to me, that's just adding a nice cool little bit of width that is going to be just in the mix enough to kind of make sure that this vocal doesn't collapse fully mono and sound really disconnected, but it's not going to be so much to where it's kind of throwing off the whole stereo balance. That pretty much does it for what we're doing on that main vocal. Next, let's go ahead and look at what we've done to this delay send. So I'm using Access on this because I don't need a ton of different kind of features. I'm really just trying to tune this enough so it doesn't go out of tune on a delay throw, because that might sound a little bit funky. So I've just got it set to the key of the song. Retune speed is at medium. I'm fine with that. And then I'm actually using Mutator. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at what it sounds without the Auto-Tune plugins on. So we've got Mutator here and Warm a little bit later. So it's just your standard kind of But what I did was I threw on Mutator and I kind of shifted it up 12 semitones, messed with the throat length and messed with the throat width, and then I added this little mutation knob right here. And this mutant mix is really nice. It's basically a dry and wet knob, and I'll kind of show you what each one is doing on its own and then all together. So as you can see, it's doing like this really cool like formant, saturation, detune, kind of like almost crushed sound, and to me that's going to give it a really, really cool bit of sauce, because otherwise delay throws can get a little bit stale and boring, especially if they happen a lot in a song. And when you turn it up to 100% mutant, it almost just sounds like it's like this crazy synth patch that you have from something like Serum. But I just want that tucked in there lightly, so we're going to pop that in, and then you could even mess with stuff like the shift pitch. I liked it up an octave. It added a cool little bit of sauce that we didn't have before. You've got that cool little throat length that we can mess with. And I put that right about here, and then Alienize is kind of cool. What that'll do is it'll start to like reverse things into themselves. I didn't use it for this, but I have used it actually on like this cool little trap bell synth, and that sounded really, really sick. So definitely play around with that feature. We're not going to be looking at it during this video. So I use something like Mutator to basically give me a little bit of extra kind of sauce and flair. And then I felt like this just needed to punch out a little bit more. So I gave this Warm, and I actually set this to the crunch setting instead of the velvet setting. The velvet setting is amazing if you have like a really, really smooth, clean microphone, but you want just a little bit of that kind of like vintage tube factor where you're going to get something out of like a Neumann or a Telefunken. Pop this on, put the drive at like 3 or 4. That's going to give you a nice little bit of extra sauce in the mids. However, right here for crunch, we're going to be using this more for like an actual distortion effect. And it's super simple. You've basically got your drive, your input, your output, and then whatever module you want to be doing. So let's check that in the mix and kind of show you what it sounds like without any of those.
Why does everybody see?
Let's turn them off. It's going to be a delay throw, nothing special.
Why does everybody seem so happy all the time?
But if you just want a little bit of that extra to kind of give you some extra width and some extra kind of character and flavor, I love those two plugins for something like that. All right, now let's look at something that you can do with a plugin like Harmony Engine. So what we have right here is, once the whole beat kind of comes in,
I can't answer in my selfish.
so when everything kicks in there, I wanted a little bit of extra impact with those vocals, but I didn't really have time to go back and track, 12 different vocal parts to give me some harmonies and some spread. So what I did was I actually just duplicated that main vocal and then popped on Harmony Engine. You set that to the key of the song, so I set it to E major, and then you have all of these different settings that you can mess with. I didn't really touch most of them because they all sounded pretty fine, but you've got the glide rate, which is going to be like your transition between notes, basically kind of like humanizes how quick that'll kick in. And then you've got your pitch variation and your timing variation, and this is really to get that nice spread between the different vocals that it's going to create for you. So I basically just threw this in with the stock settings on E major and let it run, and it sounds like this. And it's really, really cool when you tuck it into the mix. It's not super noticeable at all. When it's on its own, it sounds super digital and it sounds cool, but it's probably not what most people are going for. But when you tuck that into the mix, nobody would ever even notice, especially if you take the input right here and you turn that all the way down. This will basically be like a dry wet knob for the input. So if you want your main vocal to shine through and use this more on a track where you're just going to kind of have these supplement that, you can. I just turned it off because it's going as a separate track. And then what you can do here is you can pick a choir, you can make it 2 voices, 4 voices, 16 voices. I didn't really need to do any of that. This was just a really nice little extra touch that I have kind of here and there in the song. But using Harmony Engine for something like that is really, really great because it saves you a ton of time going back and tracking on something that you might just have here for kind of emphatic purposes. And that does everything I needed to. Let's go ahead and look at something that's not super vocal related in terms of the actual top line, but it still did use an auto-tune effect, and we do still, it technically is vocals because it's gonna be beatboxing. So I wanted to add a little bit of extra movement to this verse, so I just did this. But what I did was I used something like punch to basically go ahead and give me a little bit of extra transient response without doing too much with a compressor. This is just going to give me a little bit of impact because, as you'll know if you've ever tried to beatbox into a microphone, you have to have the pop filter up and you have to be kind of far back. Otherwise, you're going to get these crazy, nasty plosives that are almost impossible to get out. So if you track it a little bit more flat, you can go back in and add something like punch to give it a little bit of that extra punch. I'm gonna drag it down. I don't need it that aggressive. We're gonna put it back at 40. And then I just got some EQ. And then we actually have this mutator right here. And this is another instance of kind of how you can use this. And that just gives me a little bit more of a digital effect. I didn't want something that was gonna sound exactly like a human voice. Then I'm gonna pop on Duo just to spread this out a little bit, so we have a little bit of extra width. So adding those 3 different plugins from Auto-Tune Unlimited basically made that really, really stale, kind of transient, nasty beatboxing loop into something that's going to be a bit more usable in the actual mix. Now we can go ahead and look at how I use their plugin Choir. So we're using Choir on something that actually is kind of a choir. So as you can see here, we have 24 vocals for this choir. So we definitely didn't have to add this plugin, and I actually can show you what it sounds like without it. But with it, I just put basically an instance of choir on every single track, and I would only put it for like the 4 vocalist setting. And then all together, it gave me this really, really, really massive kind of choir. And in the mix, that shines through a lot more.
And my self-esteem is running out and I can't see.
And again, that's just its own instance on all of these different tracks. And then that all kind of comes together to be one big print with all of those on it. So that added a lot of extra dimension. Let's see if we can show you guys what it sounds like without any of those. And of course, there's some extra like delay and stuff on the actual send. But just so you can hear that effect as a solo thing, here you go. And it's pretty subtle, but when you start mixing it with a lot of different vocals, you're going to get a lot of that extra dimension, which if you're trying to do a choir, is going to be really, really essential. Otherwise, it's just going to sound like you tracked one person 20 times. So that's definitely a super, super handy plugin if you want to get that really, really massive stacked vocal sound, but you don't want to use something that's going to be like a chorus or like a traditional doubler where it's going to start like really, really affecting modulation and pitch and stuff like that. You want something really, really subtle that just does all of those things kind of in the background and not so much at the forefront where it sounds like a really, really affected track. Now we're going to look at the last plugin, which might be my favorite out of the entire bundle, and we're going to use this in a couple different instances. This plugin is called Articulator, and this is their talk box and their vocoder. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we use that in the actual pre-chorus. So basically how this works is this is different than other vocoders we've used on the channel before. What you're going to do for this is you're basically going to have what I have called the Articulator send. And basically what your Articulator send is going to be is that is the sound that will trigger whatever sonic sound you want to actually come through. So let's say that I have a guitar that I want to use like a vocal talk box on. I would have my vocal as the send because that's going to be what's going to my guitar, and the vocal is basically going to let my guitar actually play versus not play when it's not going. So we have the vocal track right here just duplicated, nothing crazy is happening at all, and then we have our vocoder track, which is going to be the Articulator. So you're going to pop Articulator on first there, and I'm going to set that to a sidechain, and see this is where I'm pulling in that Articulator send, so your lead vocal, anything like that. And the reason that I have this as its own thing instead of just doing that from the main vocal is because I've actually sent this to no bus, because the way that Cubase routes, if you're sending something, typically you have to monitor both of them to be able to listen to only the sent sound. So this is sounding a lot more technical than it really is. Basically, if you just make this its own track and send it to its bus, you're not going to get that actual vocal sound coming through other than through the actual Articulator. So let's take a look at what we've done. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do in the Articulator plugin. You've got like your format modulation. You can even have like an amplitude mod where it's going to kind of go back and forth. You've got a noise level right here that I have set to stereo. And then you can even have your control signal coming through so it can be like a dry wet thing. I didn't really need any of that in this instance because I'm using it more as like a vocoder instead of a talk box. And then you've got your audio signal right here. We're not going to mess a ton in here. You can actually find full videos where they break down exactly how that plugin works. But one thing that I did want to talk about and why I like Articulator over some of the competitive vocoder talkbox plugins is because you use this on the track that you actually want to make your sound. So our vocoder is being triggered by this sound that I've made in Serum. And as we change this, it's going to change the complete Articulator sound. And when you could do this, you have complete control over what that sound is going to be doing, and that's why they can get away with this being more of like a talk box than a vocoder, is because you really get to control what signal is going to be coming through, and it's not just something that is in kind of a preset folder of different noises and kind of harmonic generators. So you could easily pop Articulator on something like a guitar stem and then route your vocal through that, and your vocal is going to come through as a guitar sound and not a synth sound. And I really think that that's a cool thing to do because it basically gives you unlimited access to having all of these cool different vocal instrument ideas where you can have like a vocal coming through as something completely different rather than just being a vocoder where you get to kind of pick, you know, different chord stacks that are going to go under it. So we used it as a traditional vocoder right there, but let's go ahead and look at it more as like a synth element in one of these. We have this post-chorus Articulator set up the same exact way, but what I did was I made a patch in Serum that's actually going to have some movement and it's going to have some flavor, and we've got a little bit of automation. So pairing that. And now we just got to use a vocal as a pad, as a swelling instrument, as a rhythmic instrument, and that's something that I was never able to do with the vocoders that I had used in the past. And then this was a really, really fun instance, and this will be the last one that we talk about in the video. We kind of used it almost more as like a talk box, traditional like playthrough vocoder. So I just have this one vocal right here. Let's go ahead and turn off Articulator, and then I'll route this so you can actually hear this. So I just have this vocal right here that's going to trigger the actual Articulator.
And I'm feeling so stuck and I can't get out. And I'm feeling so stuck and I can't get out.
It's just that repeated over and over and over. We're going to send that back to no bus so we don't get any of that dry sound. And then let's turn on Articulator, and I've got this kind of like detuned, like retro Bruno Mars-y, Charlie Puth kind of preset on there. It's from our retro pack, which I believe is free on our website if you guys want to go download that. And then now with the vocal coming through, we've got so we were able to use Articulator as a traditional vocoder. We were able to use it as a vocoder that's going to act more as kind of this modern synthesis sound designer. And then we were even able to use it to actually let that vocal shine as a vocal, just with a more kind of instrument-driven kind of sonic characteristic to it. And that's going to do it for our tutorial. As you can see, there are so many different uses for so many of these plugins that come in this Auto-Tune Unlimited bundle. A lot of them can be super creative. A lot of them can be fixing things that you might want to fix for an actual sonic and mix aspect, but definitely get creative. There is a ton of stuff that you can dive into, and there's so many more features and functions that we didn't even get to cover today in this tutorial. So definitely head over to Auto-Tune Unlimited and check that out. But as I promised, let's go ahead and talk about the giveaway. So when Auto-Tune partnered up with us, they basically wanted to make sure that we could give something back to our community. So we are going to be picking 3 winners. The first place winner is going to get 5 years of Auto-Tune Unlimited, and that is a massive bundle. It's over $1,200 worth of Auto-Tune Unlimited plugins for 5 years. The second place winner is going to get 3 years of that pack, and then the third place winner is going to get 1 year. So if you want to enter, it's super simple. There's a link in the description. It's basically a landing page on the Make Pop Music site that you can fill out your name, your email address, and a couple different questions. This will enter you into our email list as well as the Antares Auto-Tune email list. But this is how you enter. You don't have to turn in anything. You don't have to do anything crazy. You don't have to submit a track. All you have to do is put your info, answer the questions, and then we will be picking a winner next week. So the video that comes out next Friday will announce who won that. We'll also share on our Instagram and on our Facebook. But we hope to see you all enter, and we hope to see you all using the Auto-Tune Unlimited package. Let us know if you have any questions about it, or if you want to see us use any of these plugins in more detail. But if you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. If you did like this video, like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. And thank you guys so much for all of the support. It means a ton when we can do sponsored videos. But in the meantime, I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and safe, and we will see you guys next time. Much love. Peace out.
Will you come around and save me?